And we're live. Hi, everybody. My name is Dee. This is Inclusive Agiles Presents. We are here with doing ADHD parenting with Kristen Nazzaro. We are, again, Inclusive Agile. We are Agile consultants that bring diversity, equity, and inclusion into the default way that agility works. We can bring that agility to businesses that are tech or not tech. But really, the whole thing that we love recognizing is that everyone deserves to have a peaceful experience at work, or at least a joyful one. Sometimes we can't all be peaceful, but at least a joyful experience at work, and no one should ever feel bullied at work. And so we're here to create that. And part of what we do is we like to call it Elevate Voices, which is why we have Kristen Nazzaro here talking to us about ADHD and how neurodivergence does affect our work. So I'm super excited to hear way more from Kristen. So a little bit I have on Kristen here is you are an ADHD parenting coach. You have a parent-centric coaching approach that helps the parents understand the kiddos' brains. First, introduce yourself, add whatever else I'm missing in there, but talk to me specifically about that.
Yeah, sure. So it's great to be here. Thank you guys for inviting me. So I am someone that I wear many hats on purpose and also not on purpose because it overwhelms me a lot. But yes, I'm an ADHD parenting coach. I went down that journey after I got my own ADHD diagnosis and also from being a school psychologist. I am currently finishing my grad school degree to be a licensed school psychologist. And there I see a lot of parents that just don't feel like they have enough access to what their child needs to thrive. And they don't know how to help them at home. And a lot of the times that is with neurodivergence, with ADHD. So I kind of combined my personal and my professional life to merge them into what I am doing now. So happy to be here.
And I'm gonna pop in for half a second before we move on and just say thank you. I'm grateful to the gods of the algorithm. I think I said that in my post the other day that Kristen came across my feed and we interacted a few times, maybe through comments and things. And then Kristen had a free masterclass that I attended last month, about a month ago, something like that. It was so helpful. So definitely, if you're doing more of those, let's talk about and hype that.
Yes.
As a also recently diagnosed, but surprised to know an ADHD person. Yeah, Krista, everyone else understood that already about you. What do you mean? And have a gaggle of ADHD children. The insights that I got from that have been so helpful. Like immediately that day, better relationship with my 16-year-old based on learning stuff. So there's my personal thank you to you for that master
class. For hyping that up for me.
It's a big deal. So I would love to hear about, you were diagnosed as an adult as well, right? Can you talk about your diagnosis journey, maybe a little bit at the beginning of this, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. So it's actually funny, as I think I talked to you about this, how I was first just going to do parent coaching for neurodivergence for special needs. But then as I talked to more ADHD adults, because they had kids with ADHD, I was doing kind of my what's it called? I was kind of looking into getting more. God, I can't think of the word. Don't you hate that? But anyways, I was doing stuff for my business, talking to more people about it, getting more insights of my potential clients. Yeah, and I talked to a lot of ADHD adults, and that was how I realized, shit, that's me too. So then I got my own diagnosis. I did a lot of reflecting on my past, went down a lot of rabbit holes, got my own diagnosis, and just went from there. And it was really life altering, but in a good way, because I was like, I'm not just weird. I everything makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. But
There was something you said in there that I would love to kind of explore with you if you're
mhm,
if you're open to it. And it was
yeah.
that you did a lot of that reflecting, right?
Mhm,
Looking back at your life and kind of taking a different account for it. I think
yeah.
I was diagnosed as well as an adult, so
Mhm,
joining the club. Um, and I hear a lot of people talking about how, hey, if does that actually help, right? Like you're
yeah.
spending all this time going through your history, talking about
Right.
how it might have been ADHD. How does that actually help? And you kind of landed in
Yeah.
it was hard, but it was worth it. Talk if you're open
Yeah.
to it. Like how,
Yeah.
how did how did you go through those? And what are some of the examples?
Yeah, I love that question because it's so true. And that's something I get a lot with what I do because, as we know, a lot of ADHD kids have undiagnosed ADHD parents. So, a lot of the times they may ask, is it worth it to go through that? Kind of what led you down that journey? And I think for me, it was knowing how my brain works and how I can make it work better, how I can support myself because I always felt kind of learned helplessness, when there's so many things that don't work for you that you just don't try or you just give up instead of finding those supports. So I think that's what just having that acknowledgement of there are things out there for me and that I'm not alone in this too. I think that's another big one being I felt alone a lot. Like I didn't fit in. I was literally the outcast. So having a tribe, a group of people that understood was also a really big reason for me wanting to get diagnosed and get that understanding. In terms of specific examples, in my childhood, I was always organized disaster, if you can even consider it organized. Probably mostly the disaster part. I always was lost in conversations if it was more than one person because I was always in my head. Didn't have many friends growing up. I had a lot of social anxiety in high school. I think it may have been related to feeling very out of place and always judged in elementary and middle school. Although I got good grades, it was a lot of accountability from other people. And then once that accountability was taken away in college, that went straight down the toilet and I got my first C's and D's. So that's how that all of those kind of put together, I realized that there's a reason for these differences within me.
Yeah. I
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
yes, thank you. I'm like just letting it kind of sink in for half a minute. Like
Yeah.
the going back through your life and recontextualizing these things that have happened, things that you've done, things that you've thought and said, and
Mhm.
then realizing that you thought you were, running two legs with everybody else, but
Yeah.
you didn't have shoes on, or like there was mud underneath you, right? Like
Mhm.
you thought you were just not doing as well. I mean, you as in me, right? As well as you'd
Yeah.
like to be. And I didn't understand the mud. I didn't understand this feels so hard. Why can't I just do this thing that I know
Yeah.
I can do? Like it was so
Yeah.
weird. I want to put a thing out there for parents to get diagnosed. And this is going to be a
Yeah.
shame moment for me for just a minute, like maybe a little bit
Yeah.
of vulnerable. My now 20-year-old kiddo came to me and said, "Mom, I think I deserve financial compensation." With a little bit of a joke, right? Like they're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Okay, what's this about?" And they said, "Mom, you remember last year or 2 years ago, at some point, when I was trying to tell you about how I thought I was ADHD, and you, Mom, me, said something like, 'Oh, I do all of those things too, and I'm not ADHD. You're fine. It's okay. We'll help you through this.'" And I'm a little ashamed of myself for not understanding, or for not understanding that that was difficult for them.
Yeah.
That I was brushing over something that they needed help with, and I'm like,
Mhm.
"No, we could do this." Like,
Mhm.
and after getting diagnosed, learning how my brain works, how their brain works, and how my other are very different flavor of ADHD than me. My diagnosis makes me a much better parent. So I think it's worth it for that.
Yeah. And just to bounce off of that, I feel like it adds a level of being validating their experience and understanding their experience too. Because it sounds like you hold a little bit of just, I'm just to explore that a little bit. Like, it sounds a little bit like it was like going into that was not easy for, it wasn't easy for you to be in that position with your kiddo, like like when they felt a little bit invalidated and you were aware of that. So kudos to you for using that as a way to grow and move forward.
Thanks.
And I appreciate that. Yeah.
And thank you, but yeah, mostly
Yeah.
it helped a lot. It helped a lot, and
Yeah.
it helped me fix some things that I needed to fix. So
Yeah.
great. Enough about me. I've talked about.
We will move on from vulnerability chat.
Well, I would love to add into that. As another parent of an ADHD kid, I went through the exact same experience. We go through and we get him, we get my son diagnosed, and then it was pretty clear, like, I think I might have a problem. So I went and talked to my doc, and she has you fill out this thing, and she left and walked right back in. Right, I had scored so high that she left and came right back in. She's like, "Okay, yeah, let's get moving." And so, what was powerful for me in understanding this diagnosis, even though it ended up giving me the opportunity, but also the pain of deconstructing my life and my value,
Mhm.
it helped me get rid of untrue things that I
Yeah.
thought about myself, right?
Yeah.
That people told me for years, right? It was a family known thing to say, D is really, really, really smart. They can figure out anything, but they're super lazy. I mean, that was a family thing that we would just, it was just accepted as the way that
Yeah.
I was. And so I went through my life going, okay, well, how do I enable myself in my laziness? Instead of going, how do I create systems that actually make sense for me? And when I found out about ADHD, like going through and going, oh, I'm not lazy.
Yeah.
I have I have to jump a little bit higher. I have to run a little bit faster just to show up like everyone else does. And in my mind. And so that mud, right, that sits on us
Yeah.
that Carissa brought up.
I,
So that I love that
yeah.
your journey too, and just saying, hey, I get to not only know myself better, but know other people and other kids and my kids, or yeah.
Yeah. And I love that you pointed at the natural thing that a lot of ADHD kiddos and adults are told, that they're lazy, that they're unmotivated, that they can't, that they're so smart, but it's hard for them to do the things. But it's not always. I have such a problem with the word laziness in general because I feel like it's not even like some, because no one is really lazy. It's just, it's a skills deficit. You need help to get to that point. And you are able to do it. You just need to learn the skills to be able to do it, whether you're ADHD or not ADHD. And saying laziness really makes it feel internal, like it's not something that you can change about yourself. But everyone has that power to change that about themselves. Again, ADHD, not ADHD, with a little bit of extra help. And ADHDers tend to need a little bit more of an extra push with that.
I love what you said there. I'm an agile coach. That's what we
Mhm,
do here, right?
mhm.
And I talk a lot about systems thinking, and my introduction to systems thinking is pretty simple. Systems thinking is the idea that everyone is doing the very best they can with the information that they have,
Yes, absolutely.
right? So all they need is better information to do things differently. And
Mhm.
so it took a long, I still have to like stop myself from being, no, you need to work a little bit harder. You're not being lazy. But then there's also the next step of going, what are the tools that I can start
Yeah,
using to show
yeah,
up in more effective ways? And that's what I love about growth mindset and systems thinking, is this idea that everything, like you were saying, everything is a skill. Everything we out there is a skill that you can get better at with practice, intention, and tools, right? Sometimes people need tools, and that's okay. It's just not practice intention for everybody. Some people need that extra thing, right? From a cane to hearing aids to the Pomodoro technique, right? All of those are just tools for people to be able to do things that other people do without thinking about them.
I love that. Yeah, no, I love that. And that goes a lot with my philosophy too, and how I not just handle parent coaching now, but also life, that everything is just a skill that you need to get better at, that we all are doing the best we can. And just to talk a little bit about the parenting aspect of that too, because I know there's probably a lot of parents on here that are supporting ADHD kiddos, that it's not that that's not a mindset that a lot of parents have accepted yet. They are always told these negative things about their kiddos, and it's hard to kind of reframe that as they are actually doing the best they can with the tools that they have right now. And just letting that sink in for a moment with every client I have, everyone I talk to, can really be empowering, because it's not a way that we're taught to think about behavior. We're taught that it's good or bad, but we're all doing the best we can, and we all want to do well.
Yeah, the way you said it in the workshop hit me really hard. The masterclass. It's their reality.
Yeah.
My kid, when I get mad and he shuts down, because that's what his ADHD brain does.
Yeah.
He goes into freeze, right? Fight, flight, or freeze. Mm-hmm. We talked about that in the thing. Mm-hmm. My ADHD brain jumps to fight. His jumps to freeze. And my reality in that moment is so different than his reality in that moment. What is real for him in that moment is so different than what it is for me. And the power of that word to recognize that it's not even like perception. It's his reality. That is what is going on for him. It is real. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not easy to see that our reality is different than theirs, right? Mm-hmm. We tend to jump to what our mind is telling us and to what they're thinking, what we think that they are thinking, which isn't always right. Like you see it with you see it with teachers, you see it with parents, everyone does it. It's human nature. But gaining that awareness of, okay, their reality may be a little bit different, and that's okay. And I always teach the power of asking questions to figure out that reality, to help with that, instead of just jumping to a conclusion. Asking what's going on for them, what made you frustrated. Can I take a couple guesses at what made you frustrated? Because that's how you are going to get to what their reality is, instead of accepting your reality as the only reasonable perception.
That's so beautiful. I've been talking a lot about language and how language generates the reality around us. And so I like that you talked about everything that we are affects the way we view the world.
Yeah.
And the language we use to describe what's happening is only ours, right? Mm-hmm. We're the only ones with that language that's describing the experience we're having. Someone's having a completely different experience in the same room with completely different language. And this is super important and agile in recognizing everyone can be in the same meeting for an hour and be agreeing the entire time. But when they leave, no one actually believes the same thing and everyone goes different directions, right? That understanding that people come and understand things differently is really hard to get, hard to see. Oh, you probably experienced that differently than I did, and then I probably made it worse.
Yeah. I was actually talking to a friend of mine about this a couple days ago, when I was kind of, because with what I do, I tend to either go coach or psychologist with the people in my life too, by complete accident. But I was kind of exploring with him, like, his views on judgment and being judged about a particular thing. And his reality is that he judges so many people unconsciously that he's like, that's the way that everyone's mind works. Everyone has that perception. If I am level-headed and I do that, I think everyone else is going to do that. And it takes a lot to realize that's not always the case.
It's huge. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about how your coaching practice works?
Yeah, sure. We got into like kind of the nuts and bolts of it with like the philosophy, like all the like deep intricacies without even explaining what the heck it is I do. That's just the way our brains work, I feel like. But
it is a little bit. We're being very calm and not super jumpy on this.
No,
I'm proud of us.
bouncing around.
Go us, high five.
But yeah, I would like to give a better frame for that. And this call is really about helping people understand the service that you provide.
Yeah.
And we love talking about ourselves, and I want to keep talking about all of this right now. I'll keep interjecting, but I do want to spend some more time just on what you do.
Sure.
So tell me more about it.
So in short, I am an ADHD parenting coach, meaning that my specialty is focusing on parents of children with ADHD. So what that really means is helping parents support the child they have, not necessarily changing how they view, not just necessarily changing stuff about their child, getting them to do X, getting them to behave better, why get it. It's more about understanding and accepting the child you have for who they are and learning how to support them better. Because with ADHD, it's very challenging. It's not easy to learn how to support, right? Because we have unique needs, we have unique tools. We're not going to learn things the same way. We're not going to respond to things the same way. And as parents, you're taught kind of this model of this is the only way to parent. And anything, I love your clapping. Anything that's different is seen as bad parenting, is seen as permissive. It's seen as not acceptable. There's so much judgment and hatred, and no one for parents to really feel like to kind of lean on to understand what their child needs and build a plan to put that into action in a non-judgmental way. So that's what parent coaching is really about, giving you a space to kind of unload on what's happening and explore solutions that you probably already have in you, but you may need help to either follow through with or bring to the surface, and also learning new strategies too.
Love that. So how do you initially engage with people? Like, are you, how do people find you? Kind of what's the process to work with you?
Yeah. So I will say I am kind of all over the place, but I'm trying to like hone in on where I am, because being all over the place doesn't work for me. I am mostly on Facebook, and LinkedIn is where people find me. So the two places, luckily, where this is. But yeah, so when I start working with people, I keep my coaching sessions very flexible, meaning what we learn new skills, yes, about things like communication, collaboration, ADHD specific tools, emotion regulation, but we learn them in the framework of what's happening with you. So if there's a unique situation, a unique problem, we'll learn the tools while going through that unique problem and kind of get to the goal of that by the end of the session. So when people first start working with me, I do probably ask a lot more questions about what's happening about their child and their unique strengths. I have like a bunch of onboarding stuff that I do, but it's really meant to help me understand your family better. So, because I'm not going to be working with the child, right? So I really need to understand as much as possible to see what's going to help and see what's going to work. So it's one-on-one, unless parent and spouse want to do it together, then I do it with couples as well.
I watched a something on YouTube. I think it was probably from Attitude Magazine or something. The ADD
Yeah.
Attitude Magazine.
Attitude, yeah.
Trying to remember how they said it. This guy was basically saying for smaller children, he says meds are great. I mean, they help more than behavioral therapy does for kids.
Yeah.
And he's like, get the parents into therapy. Don't worry about the kids until they're older.
Yeah.
Don't worry about correcting the kids' behaviors.
Yeah.
Correct the parents and help the kids with medicine until they're a little bit older.
Exactly.
Has that been your experience with this as well? Or is there an
Yeah.
age better to start working more one-on-one with the kids than parents?
Yeah, that's really, I love that because I think it's really accurate, right? Because at a certain age, kids do become accountable for their own actions and they're not as willing, the adults don't play as much of a role in their life,
Yeah.
right? And I feel like you see that a lot with like older teenagers that are ready to transition into college. And that's when I find that working with the kiddo is more motivated to access the tools themselves and to have that in, to want to gain that accountability within themselves because they're more aware of what the rewards are going to be for the long term. They see themselves getting into college. They see what the light at the end of the tunnel could be. It's not just high school that kind of feels never ending. It's, I see how this is going to help me through life. But when they're younger, I definitely agree that working with parents is more beneficial because once the parents have the tools, they're learning how to teach this to their child, and it's all about empowering parents too, so they feel like they are able to connect with their child, they're able to build a relationship, they're able to support their unique brain and not feel like the world is crumbling around them all the time. Going through 18 years of life like that is, I cannot speak from personal experience, but I can imagine the heartbreak of going through 16 to 18 years of life of chaos, really bad relationships, household messes, not connecting with your child and not feeling like you have the relationship that you desired. So that's why I feel like I'm going on a tangent here, but that's just to say that helping a parent is way more helpful than working with a child when they're a lot younger, definitely.
Can I add on to that for just a second?
Yeah.
I hope that people take this with the intention I'm putting into it. But I do talk about, I like to talk about how a lot of these things in coaching kids on ADHD or queer or racial issues, they're all a whole lot. They're a whole lot like dog training. You don't train the dog. You never train the dog. The dog already knows how to respond to the things that are happening around it, right?
Yeah, right.
You train the human to interact with the dog in the way that makes sense for the dog and
Right.
creates peace for the dog, so it makes it easy to connect with you. That's the
Yeah.
same thing with a lot of these experiences going, hey, how do we make this experience go better with my kid? I need them to do these things. And a lot of the deconstruction is, no, you don't. What does the kid really need? What do you really need in this? And it's generally not going to be, I need my kid to behave exactly like this. It's, I want to reach outcomes that look like this.
Yeah.
And shifting that perception. And I get that I just mentioned that those are all like dog training, but in dog training, you are training the adult, right? It's just the same thing. You are training the adult. It has nothing to do with any of them being dogs, but the fact that the people caring for the thing are going to be the most impactful.
Yeah. I love that. I love that analogy, even though it did have to do with dogs. I think it made sense.
It gets people
definitely.
nervous.
No. Yeah. What?
I was just saying, you got us to.
You got full circle.
I brought it enough.
I was going to bounce off that on the idea of something that you mentioned of trying to get your child to do X or get them to behave in a certain way. A lot of parents do see that as the overall outcome. But my perception after going through the training and the things that I have is when you are raising a kid to just behave and just to do things willingly from an adult, what exactly are they gaining from it? Are they gaining resilience, empowerment, being able to problem solve? it doesn't seem like that's the best approach to get that. So it's about teaching children how to solve their own problems, how to be their own advocate, but also respect boundaries and respect values that are put in front of you.
Boundaries. Can I tell you, I didn't even learn what boundaries were until my 30s. Not really.
Yeah, same.
Right? Not really. I didn't have a good definition for it until Saint Brene Brown. What's okay and what's not okay. That helped me understand.
Yeah, it's not about the rules. It's about what is the boundary here and what value is it lied in.
And it's between two people or two
exactly. It should be like a mutual thing that's decided on, unless there's like ones that are like don't run in traffic. Well, obviously don't run in traffic. Or that's more rooted in like a safety boundary, right? But those are things that a kid may still do and want to do, but that's because they don't know any better. And that's kind of like a non-negotiable, but there are ones that you can kind of have this mutual relationship with.
For sure.
Yeah.
Digging into that a little tiny bit more, the idea there of it. I'm going to be a little selfish because I'm going to ask kind of a question about teenage kids with ADHD.
Go for it.
So I think the struggle that we have, and they're probably in the other room listening to me right now, is the or they'll just come make fun of me on YouTube later. That's fine. The struggle, and we've talked about this a lot as a family, is how do I support you to do the thing that you need to do without nagging you or taking away your accountability for doing that thing, right? I don't want to just like, peace out. You're almost 18 now. Figure out how to get your own stuff done. I'm not helping you anymore.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the middle, there's a line there between supporting them and taking it from them, right?
Yeah, right.
And I don't know if you have any like advice or thoughts about that, especially when you're dealing with in this space
teenagers that say right when you say left, essentially.
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so common, right? Because like we said, teenagers are naturally inclined to want to exercise their autonomy and their independence and kind of branch away from you a little bit. My question and my initial response is, what are some things that they value and how can you bring that into the things that they need to do? Because they are going to be looking more for things that resonate with their values. They don't care as much about our values as adults at that age. Even though little kiddos do, teenagers definitely don't. So it's more about kind of So really seeing what they value and how you can bring that into what they need to do and get done. And that happens with a lot of conversation to acknowledge their values. And that also goes into what we talked about before, realizing that they don't value the same things that we do. We may see good grades in a different, they may see it as something, oh my gosh, I have to do this because my parents are nagging me. But that we see it as adults as this is going to get them into college. This is, I value continued education and learning, but they may value something differently that's hidden beneath the surface there that can really help them achieve the outcome that they need to achieve.
Love that. Thank you.
Yeah. Glad I could help. You have any reflections or initial thoughts on that?
This is one of those things where I'm going to have to sit and think about it a little bit more because it's one of those things where you're like, of course I've talked to them about their values. I'm their mom and I care about what they, and then you have to stop and go, I think I need to sit with this for a minute.
Yeah.
And really examine like my initial response.
There's a lot of defense. There could be something I see a lot of too is, not saying this with you, but a lot of defensiveness of saying that you may not know these things right away, or you may think that you do, because of course you're their parent. You do know, them inside and out. But there's maybe, again, more there that hasn't really been willing to be explored quite yet.
Yeah. And they change. And
And
that's the best thing about teenagers, by the way. Anybody who's listening, this is one of those, my also teenage kid who grew up next to my home, not one of my kids' friends. Sam, if you're watching this, this is a clip you need to take out and help me post it.
I love that you're giving tasks. Like, this is ADHD
I'm giving tasks.
right here.
I'm giving tasks as we talk about.
I'm going to give it right now.
Here you go. Take it.
Also, sorry.
Now we're laughing too hard. Now I've got to get back to what my point was, because damn ADHD brain. Give me half a second.
I forget what we were talking about. It's okay.
It was going to be so important. Anyone who's watching this, teenagers, people tell you that teenagers are difficult and be so scared of when your kids become teenagers because they're not young and cute anymore. No, teenagers are the best phase of life with your kids. So far. I mean, I only have a young 20s and they're expensive. Sorry. They're probably listening to. But once they hit teenagers,
they're people.
They have their own brain.
Yeah.
They're people. They bring you ideas that you didn't give them. And sometimes they're awful, challenging ideas. And then later you realize that whatever, they're the best. Teenagers are fun.
And just,
it's a great
I didn't want to interrupt, but yeah, just that they're experimenting. They're finding what works. And again, they have like you said, they have their own thoughts. They have their own ideas that they want to try. So even if it's a stupid idea, they're exercising that autonomy and what's going to work for them. They need you not necessarily to be an authoritative figure anymore, but more of a guide and essentially a coach for those ideas.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And we're not quite to the end of this yet. I know we want to leave some time for questions. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen any questions come in yet. But I did want to just kind of give a little bit of a time check there. We've got maybe like 5 or 6 more minutes before we're going to open up for questions and then kind of wrap.
So
what other stuff do you want?
Questions in while we're waiting, and then yes, I'm sorry.
That's all I was saying. Yeah. What else do we want to make sure we cover? Could you talk some more about what's coming up for you? Are you going to do some more master classes? How do we engage?
Yeah. So full disclosure, well, yes, I am going to do more master classes, but I am probably going to start them more after I finish my schooling, because I'm actually getting my school psychologist license in less than a month, which I'm very excited about. Even though that's not entrepreneurial, it's still a very big journey that I am so glad to be done with and be able to start a new journey with that, as well as the experience is going to help me with the coaching that I do. But I'm going to be putting a lot of my time towards that for the next month. So starting in June, I will be running my masterclass again, and I will have stuff on that on Facebook and LinkedIn. I also have a Facebook group called Confident ADHD Parenting for anyone that's on Facebook. I'm still going to try to post in that regularly, even if I am taking a pause in other areas. But yeah, that's pretty much what I've got going on right now. I have a lot of things on my to-do list to start doing. Sorry, I got distracted by the submit your questions now. I'm going to be perfectly upfront about that. But just thought, since this is an ADHD chat, I might as well be upfront about that. But yeah, so I have a lot of things on my to-do list after I get my license, and I'll see which one of them I prioritize.
I have a question. So
yeah.
my oldest, was diagnosed with ADHD, and I already kind of talked about that drove me to get diagnosed as well. And he started repeating some of those self-deprecating ideas, right? Like, I'm not patient enough to, I can't spend my time doing that. And I mean, I said the same things about myself before I knew I had ADHD, right? The self-talk, I think, is pretty standard in recognizing other people could just do this thing and I have a really hard time with it.
Yeah.
How do I talk to him about how everything's a skill and we can still really learn and grow, but what else can I help him understand that what he has isn't a inability to do something, but a I don't know what you would call it. Like, how do I talk to him?
Skill deficit? Is that what you're thinking?
That's great. Yes. Yes.
Sure.
Right. How do you have a
Let's go
skill
with that.
deficit and how can we work through that? And
Yeah.
is it important to? That's the other thing I've been talking with him about is
Yeah.
recognizing, hey, if you want to figure out a way to live your life in such a way that you don't need to like really focus on things sometimes, we can. But
Yeah.
you're going to spend a lot more time trying to figure that out. And
Yeah.
some of these skills will help you wherever you go.
Yeah. And first, I wanted to say I like that you kind of lead with acceptance of the way that his brain works and accepting the thoughts that he is having and the things that he is saying about themselves. Not necessarily saying you agree with them, but you accept them as reality. So you're not invalidating those and not invalidating his experience, which is really important too. It sounds like based on what I'm hearing.
Well, now
But
I'm going, oh God, did I invalidate? Because I probably did. So now
but
I've got to go fix that.
well, that's
Yeah.
something to be aware of for now, which is good too. It's everything's a step. I also want to reflect a little bit on is I wonder if there is a difference between what you explicitly tell him and what you implicitly do. And I see you being a little paused there.
Yeah, I'm going to be a little emotional about this particular question because it's something my partner and I talk a lot about, right? That
Mhm,
I recognize I use the same kind of voice with him when he does something ridiculous that my dad used with me, and I
mhm,
hated it, right? It was this, how
mhm.
could you have possibly decided to do that, right?
Yeah.
What would make you think this was good idea? And I do notice that, right? Yeah, all the way down. Well, so it is something that, but it is something we talk to him about, right? That we have our own ways of
Yeah.
thinking and our own ways of doing things, and also don't know how to set boundaries as well as we should by the age that we have because of history. So
Yeah.
um, I love that you actually brought that up because I think that would be a valuable conversation to have with him. Is I
Yeah.
recognize there's going to be a difference between the things I tell you and the way that I behave, and sometimes I
Yeah.
won't notice them. So tell me when that happens, right?
Yes.
You can
Yeah.
give me that feedback that the way I'm treating you does not match the way I want to treat you.
Yes. And I love that because it also shows your humanity that everyone messes up a little bit. And it's what's important is acknowledging when you mess up and when you're not behaving in the way that you should, even as an adult. It's totally okay to acknowledge that. And also then talk about what you may have or should have done differently. And try to make more of an effort and pay a lot more attention to the times that you do that what you say explicitly to him and teach is in line with what you do. So the times that you engage in positive self-talk, the times that you notice him engage in positive self-talk, really pointing tribute to that and making more space for them instead of making more space for the times that's the opposite.
Like I'm
I love-
seriously,
Oh,
Maya. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but Maya Shah.
mm,
Just this conversation is incredible. I'm learning so
Oh,
much. This is
thank
something
you.
I've spent a lot of time talking about, or at
yeah.
least watching a ton of TikTok videos on, and trying to get better at this
Right?
experience of ADHD. And just this one conversation has opened up a lot of opportunities for me to connect with my kid, help him
Oh,
understand. But I also really wanted to just take a second and call out Brett's comment. My favorite phrase is, help me understand why,
yes.
right? Not why did you
Yes.
do that? Help me understand why.
Help-
Yeah,
Yes.
it
I
was
love
really,
that. That is one of my favorite phrases too, because that shows that you want to understand and you're not aiming to judge or invalidate. You're aiming to understand their experience. And sometimes your kiddo, I will say sometimes a kiddo won't know themselves why they do certain things because they've never been taught to have that reflection quite yet. So sometimes what's important is giving them options to those. If they say, I don't know, giving them an, is it this? Could it be this? What do you think? And kind of giving them yes or no's to bounce off of and helping them think a little bit more about why this is their experience and how we may be able to make it different.
Oh, this is a LinkedIn user who I can't see, but I want to read this out loud.
Yeah.
This comment.
Ooh,
Now,
that's
acknowledging
fancy.
and allowing our kids to point out those inconsistencies also gives them a framework for speaking truth to power later. Whoever you are, I love
We
you.
love you.
Yes. That's amazing.
It's a thing that I think, again, these are, you're a parent long enough, there's lots of things you screw up. And this was a thing that I did not do as well with my older kids as my younger kids.
Mhm.
When my second to the youngest, he's 17 and a half-ish.
Mhm.
He was so quiet for so long, and then he started talking back. And I was so proud of him.
Yeah.
And I'm so mad at him still, right?
Yeah.
But I try as often as I can to stop and say, thank you for speaking up. You
Yeah.
told me an important thing. I'm so glad you found a voice and you can speak up.
Yes.
But I'm really mad at you.
Yeah. It's like,
having
yeah.
that skill.
Yeah, it's like,
I'm
what's the
hoping-
most important skill that you want to teach, and how can it be kind of fine-tuned in a way that you may find acceptable? So I love,
And how
yeah,
can they use it that way?
exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
That's so great.
if he can use it that way, and that's powerful, and that is something that you find that you and he both value and is in line with what you want to teach him, then that's beautiful that you were able to, that he found that.
Well, and it's the
I want
thing
to
is
go.
like I'm not. Go ahead.
Sorry,
ahead, Dee.
we did have a question come in that I would love to get to.
Let's get to the question. I was just to put a pin in that last thing. Thank you, commenter, for saying that.
Yes.
And just learning
Yeah.
the balance between family values and what we want kids to say and what we don't, but just recognizing and respecting the fact that when they say something hard to us, that's a powerful skill for them to have.
Yes, exactly.
Even if it's a shitty thing that they say. Oh, I just swore on my own show. Anyway. Enough
I've
from
sworn probably a couple times on here too. It's okay.
Go ahead and read the thing, Dee.
Yes.
Okay, so question from Brett Barker. I don't have any ADHD kids, just ADHD cats. But what would be some of the early things you could look for to get an idea that looking at ADHD is a good idea, like looking into getting possibly a diagnosis? So I think the question is, what are early signs, and how can we, create space for those?
Yeah. First of all, I love that I would love to learn more if you want to connect with me about your ADHD cats, because I find that very funny and same when I got so young.
They're just called cats. All cats are ADHD.
Literally, yes. But yeah, to get to your question, some of the early things that you could look for to get an idea that looking at ADHD is a good idea. So I'd take that in two perspectives. I take it as looking at the symptomology, and then looking at it kind of personally as whether or not going through that process is a good idea for you. And when you look at the symptomology, really, I did a lot of reflecting on my childhood, because that's when ADHD can't be diagnosed after a certain age. I believe it's 12, if I'm correct. Like, it has to have had developed or had signs before then. So really looking at what your childhood was like. What did you struggle with? What were people always saying about you? What where did you have challenges socially, academically, at home? What really resonated and what stuck out the most in your childhood? And reflecting on how they may have manifested as you've gotten older. Something that I realized with my ADHD is when I was younger, I was very socially anxious and quiet and didn't talk to many people. Now, as you can tell, I am not like that. And now I talk too much. So I think my hyperactivity, even when I was younger, was very much like fidgeting with my hands, playing with my hair, not being able to sit still. My parents actually told me at one point I could never be an altar person because I couldn't sit still. But then that I feel like that manifested now into the way that I talk. So now I am very fast paced. I try to slow myself down. I tend to ramble. Sorry if I rambled at all on this show. and I tend to go in a million different directions. So really looking at, okay, what was my childhood like? How could that have manifested as I got older? Now, looking at it from the other perspective of what um, of whether or not it's right for you. So for me, I really weighed my pros and cons. Like, what would it cost me, and what would I gain from it? In the end, I decided that gaining that acceptance, gaining that community, gaining that understanding of myself was more important than the that time or money that I may have spent on a diagnosis. So those are my 2 cents. I'm not sure if you guys have any other thoughts on that.
Well, I want to ask the question maybe just a little bit different way. Like, for a
Mhm.
parent who is not neurodivergent, what would they see that might make them want to say, "Hey, I need to go have my kid looked at"?
Yeah.
Yeah, how can I support my kid better? What are things that would clue them into maybe I should look at an ADHD diagnosis for them? Like,
Yeah.
if
For
they've had anything themselves.
what we're talking about the kiddo right now, right? Like what
Yeah.
signs looking for in the kiddo?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say what's important to me as a school psychologist, and something that I have taught as a way to kind of gauge that, is looking at others their age as kind of like the indicator of, okay, is because as a kid, it's really hard to see whether hyperactivity or inattention is developmentally appropriate, or if it's on the same level as a normal kid. So it's really about not just looking at your kiddo and their symptomology, but also looking at the people that they play and interact with. How long are they able to sit still? How long are they able to stay on one task or stay in one area? How long are they able to stay on one homework assignment if they're doing homework with your kiddo? And in terms of conversation, like emotional regulation is another big one. To look at other kiddos on their frustration level, ones that would be considered more, that it's kind of more relevant, resonates with more typical aged peer, and seeing whether how your kid compares to that. That's what a lot of teachers will do as well when it comes to if they have an evaluation for special education or anything like that. If they suspect ADHD, they will do a lot of comparing to others in their class, because they see what's normal, and then they see what may be a little bit developmentally inappropriate. Hmm. Yeah.
D.
I guess what I want to kind of dive into on that is um, teachers, right? Like teachers have been teachers right now are a very hot topic, right? But our exposure to, hey, let's check on my son, came from teachers, right? They came
Hmm.
from other people in his life that wanted to see him succeed. And I saw
Yeah.
huge differences in the way that newer teachers and older
Hmm.
teachers
Hmm.
interacted with him, right?
Yeah.
The second grade was an older style teacher. She'd been doing it for a really, really long time, and he ended up in the kind of troublemakers group, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, but then the very next year, right? So we get him diagnosed at that year, and then the very next year, the next teacher, we don't have an IEP for him because he's still doing really, really well. We don't put him
Yeah.
on meds because we're trying to, hey, let's tackle this how we can. And because he was really, really thin not too long ago. Um, Darn you, COVID. But what's really important is to recognize, yes, some teachers they may not actually
Yeah.
have the best interest of your kid in mind, but most
Yeah.
of them do, and most of
Most.
them are coming from a series or from education, right, and experience and a whole lot of best practices. And
Yeah.
so if this starts happening and a teacher comes to you, it's pretty normal, as I understand it, to respond defensively, to respond with, whoa, 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 my kid doesn't have a problem. But it's not a problem. It's just another way of seeing the world.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can still
Yeah.
challenge your teachers too. Like that's good, always
Yeah.
great, but they're great partners in delivering a great experience for your kids. They're not an enemy.
Definitely. I always say that you need to be treat it as being as part of the same team, because when you're kind of like combative with one another, no one really wins, right? And it's hard sometimes too if the teacher, a lot of, like you said, some teachers will have more of an old school approach that you may not resonate with, and it may seem like they don't have the best intentions. But a lot of the times, again, when they are coming to you with those problems, it's not to. I feel like a natural response, like you said, as a parent, is to feel like it's a dig against me. It's saying I did something wrong here, that it's my parenting that kind of caused this challenge. And that's kind of where that defensiveness a lot of the times comes from. And also kind of thinking that I'm raising a bad child. But it's more of a place of concern a lot of the times from what I see. Like you don't, like they, again, teachers are humans too. They are doing the best they can with the tools that they have, and that's the tools that they are using to advocate for what the child needs. But I have seen my fair share of teachers that have probably experienced a lot within education and are very burnt out and overwhelmed by it, and which kind of impacts how they are able to approach their job. And again, it's doing the best they can with what they have. That's a philosophy I take with me anywhere, not just with my coaching.
I love that. And we're just about out of time. I think that might be an interesting place to end, with the idea that
Yeah.
teachers can't do all of this. That's why having someone like Kristen providing this kind of coaching is so crucial, because the teachers can only do what they can, and they can only do it at school. They
Same
can't
with
help,
therapists. We
right?
didn't dive much into that, but therapists are more for kind of digging. Yes, they do provide strategies as well, but it's more for digging into the past and also providing help within that one session, one instance, not like continued support.
Yeah, this is an interesting niche that I didn't really know existed.
Yeah.
But I'm so grateful for. Like, I mean, like Dee said earlier, we've gotten like, and I said at the beginning, just a tiny bit around the edges makes a huge difference. Learning little teeny things makes a big difference for our kids.
Yeah. It's all about progress, not perfection.
Thank you.
Yes.
I did want to add one more thing to the whole teacher thing. We're a team, right? Kids are raised by their community. As much as we want to say that they're owned by their parents and that their parents should be the ones that are in charge of all of the things that they know and do, we're not around them 100% of the time. We don't want to be around them 100% of the time. You know, we want them to be their own people. So recognizing that other people that may come at this and say, hey, maybe this is something to talk about, they want to be part of the community, and they want to collaborate with us on creating what would end up being a happier community that understands its people better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for adding that.
Fantastic. Okay. Any final thoughts before we log off? Okay. Everybody go find Kristen on LinkedIn and in Facebook.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's called Confident ADHD Parenting for the Facebook group.
Yeah, and Blue Sky is ADHD your company.
Is my website hub for parent coaching. Yes.
Fantastic. All right, so as we're logging off, I want to say that like it came through anonymous here, but apparently this was Megan Brenner that made this comment, who is one of my favorite people in the world. Thank you, Megan. The acknowledging our mistakes. One of my favorite truth to power sort of speakers in the world. Love Megan. Thank you, Megan, for that.
Thank you.
Kristen, thank you. We will keep in touch. We'll keep working with
Yes.
you, and I'll keep sending people to you.
Yes.
I think you do great job.
Yes.
So.
Thanks everyone for being here, and again, thanks for inviting me. This was such a fantastic conversation.
Okay.
Yes.
See you later.
Can't wait to chat again.